I've been interested in the Maya culture for over 25 years, and basically I fell in love with Maya culture on my first trip to Central America back in 1986. I was just a young guy who had saved up some money, and I wanted to get south of the border and visit some of those Maya temples. And I'd read about that there were Maya people still down there in the villages, and I wanted to learn about the calendar, from the source. And that began the whole journey. Can everybody hear me okay back there? Is this a good volume? Is it good? So I'm going to dive right into this because the slides really sort of drive this along. And there's a lot of different sections that I'm going to be getting into. And I hope that it's not bewildering or anything like that. I tend to ramble too much in my prelude, and then I sort of start covering some stuff that's really, a part of the presentation. So we'll sort of launch into it. My whole work has really been dedicated to reconstructing what 2012 meant to the ancient Maya. This seems self-evident, but as 2012 has evolved in the popular marketplace, we see a whole spectrum of things out there. From the doomsday illusion to all systems and models and all kinds of different things. And I know that it's very hard to separate the signal from the noise if you go out onto the Google sphere and try to figure out what this 2012 thing's about, or what the galactic alignment is about, or what the Maya calendar is about. There seems to be a lot of conflicting ideas and information out there. My approach has been to honor and respect the authentic Maya tradition. There are indeed basic core facts of the tradition that we should all agree on before we start doing our own philosophizing. And that's all I've really been advocating over the years, is that let's get straight on the basic information and go from there. My work is really as an independent researcher, which basically means that I can say progressive things without the fear of getting fired. I don't know, this has been my passion, my life work, and I started writing articles in the late 80s. Basically, when I first went to Guatemala, it was like 1986, and so there was a lot of political stuff going on. There was the death squad activity, and I really awoke to that whole situation there. So a lot of my early work was kind of more politically oriented. And I went back as often as I could, usually every winter, if I could squirrel away enough money to do it. And I delivered relief supplies, and I helped rebuild a school in San Pedro. Into the early 90s, I started getting more interested in the Maya calendar and the astronomy, and was devouring all the academic research and information on the Maya. And I realized that there was this enigma with 2012. According to the correlation of the Maya calendar with our own calendar, this big cycle, this 13 Baktun cycle, which is a period of about 5,125 years, falls on the December solstice of 2012. That was pretty interesting. That seemed to suggest that there was some kind of intentionality built into the calendar, that it fell on an exact solstice. And nobody in the academic literature was really saying much about that. And so I started to investigate what, this 2012 mystery. Now, to understand the Maya calendar, it's more than just some kind of mathematical calendrical thing. The Maya calendar incorporates elements of astronomy, mythology, spiritual teachings, and the creation myth. And there's really two aspects of the Maya calendar research. One is the 260-day sacred calendar, which is kind of the core building block of the whole Maya calendar systems. That system still survives in the highlands of Guatemala. There are many different Maya groups speaking different dialects of the Maya language. The Quechua, the Quiche, the Tzutujil Maya. And they're all still following this 260-day calendar that's sometimes called the Tzolkin, count of days. And it's quite clear that this is an unbroken calendar that's been followed. The sequence of days has been followed. Going back to the classic period Maya, 1,000 years ago, before that, for as long as the 260-day calendar has been being followed, this same sequence of days has been tracked. So that's pretty amazing. There's been this continuity of calendar tradition going back some 2,500 years, unbroken. But the long count calendar that gives us the 2012 cycle ending date, that fell into disuse 1,000 years ago. The last date carved in stone in the long count calendar is from the early 10th century. And there was kind of a short count that got continued in the Yucatan, and we see this in some of the books of the prophecy books of the Chilam Balam priests. But the short count, started to do it in a different way, and so, by the time of the conquest, it was totally distorted, and then it was completely demolished by the late 1700s. So the whole effort to reconstruct what the long count calendar meant to the ancient Maya has been a process of research and drawing together the data and the evidence and looking at the different sites and the different parts of the tradition that could shed light on what this calendar was about. And that's really what I've been engaged in, is a reconstruction of a lost aspect of the ancient tradition. Going along with the sort of nuts and bolts reconstruction challenge, I've always been sensitive to the spiritual teachings that seem to go hand in hand with the astronomy. That's one thing I realized, is that the scientific astronomy and the spiritual teachings and the creation myth, well, certainly these have to be two totally separate things, right? No, that's an assumption of our own tradition. In our own scientific tradition, we tend to compartmentalize these two different things. And even a lot of professional Maya scholars, they seem completely unable to talk about the spiritual teachings and the astronomy in the same sentence, because in their own minds they compartmentalize these two areas as being completely mutually exclusive and separate. But the Maya themselves, they had an integrated worldview. These things went together. So my challenge and my being sensitive to the interrelationships between these two domains, I've always wanted to talk about the spiritual teachings and the creation myth and how they go hand in hand with the astronomical alignments that you find in Maya cosmology and in the calendar. So the 2012 story is my most recent book. It's kind of one-stop shopping on all things 2012. It's came out 2 years ago. Here's the paperback. So it's out in paperback now too. And maybe I could just read an excerpt from the introduction just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from with this. Kind of puts things into perspective a little bit. It's called 2012, An Unstoppable Idea. Writing this book was an immense undertaking that had to accommodate new developments in the ever-shifting features of a quickly evolving field. Because of the curious crescendo in our immediate future, and therefore unlike any other topic, 2012ology has been growing exponentially with a unique set of issues and attractions. This accelerating growth of interest in the public arena is driven primarily by urgent doomsday scenarios spun out by the mainstream media and opportunistic writers. And yet the date is not simply some newfangled gadget invented by the marketplace. It is, in fact, a true artifact of the authentic Maya calendar, which has suffered the cut and paste cosmologizing of wannabe wizards, pocket protector prophets, and celebrity showmen. This heady stew is all stirred up in the Google cauldron, making a dangerous potion for the unsuspecting newcomer. Yeah, that's kind of what I've observed happen in the 2012 discussion over the last 20 years. It's almost as if you can't, the real information starts to get buried by the noise in the marketplace. And believe me, I've been there. I know I've interviewed with the History Channel, Discovery Channel, all those places, and they seem dead set on presenting the exact opposite false information about what 2012